Hello, everybody. Welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well. And today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which will finally see the second weekend drop off for Snow White. And boy, oh boy, it is not looking good. Whether you are on Box Office Theory or Box Office Report, right now the projections are that this movie is going to be dropping roughly around 60% in its domestic second weekend, upwards of 65%, which, let's just be honest, is a terrible number. We're seeing essentially a terrible opening weekend for this movie, which we've of course seen a bunch of coverage of, even so much so that a lot of more cultural shows and political shows have even been covering it to a large extent. Pretty much everything that I've been watching and listening to has been mentioning it because that is how bad these numbers were in its opening weekend. It's looking like the second weekend's not going to be that much different, with the film potentially even losing to a brand new film from Amazon's MGM Studios, A Working Man, the new Jason Statham film, which I will say is actually kind of fun. So this is definitely, I think, going to be an interesting weekend. If the word of mouth on Working Man is good, if a lot of people who have been waiting for a fun action film featuring Jason Statham, if you liked Beekeeper, if you like pretty much anything that he has done, you'll probably like this one too. So if there's enough good word of mouth on this, yeah, you could potentially see this film take the #1 spot, or at the very least get very, very close to dethroning Snow White, which, again, as a movie, you would think as a major release from Disney, you would expect them to be wanting that movie with very little competition to be dominating that top spot for at least the next few weeks. But that is not likely going to be happening, because even if Snow White does win this weekend, I would say that this will probably be the last one of the weekends where it's able to get that #1 spot. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about also about Working Man, The Chosen Last Supper, Part 1. So the last episodes of the Chosen series, I believe, starting to get to the point of release. New film from A24. And a bunch of other releases and where they currently all stand as well. And so let's just go ahead and dive straight into it. As you can see, Box Office Theory has right now Snow White projected to make only $17 million in its domestic second weekend, bringing its total domestic to only $69.6 million. That's right. After 2 weeks domestic, this film will not have gotten even close to $100 million domestic. And in fact, as of the last update from Box Office Mojo, this movie has not even cracked $100 million worldwide. So yes, this film has been out now for a full week. This film is going into its second weekend and has not yet reached this point. This film currently is hundreds of millions of dollars in the red, and that is just based off of what we know as far as its budget, right? That is the projected $270 million budget being used as the metric. So if this film cost any more than that, and it likely did, and we'll find those numbers out over the course of this next year, guess what? That means that right now we're talking about almost close to $400 million worth of losses right now. Now, I do think that by the end of its run, it will still end up being in a loss range of $250 to $350 million. But even with that being the case, guess what? Those are abysmal numbers. You never want to see numbers like that, even if you are a massive company like Disney. And so, hey, can't say I'm all that surprised by that, but we'll be interested to see exactly what kind of drop-off we do see for this movie. Box Office Pro has a very similar outlook for it, 17 to 25 million, so maybe a little bit more bullish on what they think the film is going to be doing, right? 17 million is Box Office Theories, 17 to 25 million is Box Office Pro, so it'll be interesting to see whether it's able to pull off that range or underperform, right? We saw it happen this past weekend, right? The initial projections for the weekend had it, a little bit higher. I think it was around $43 million or so, and then it ended up being projected down to about $42 million. And so it is a film that's not really doing as well as what many projections have been indicating that it would. So again, Snow White, 17 million there, and then according to Box Office Reports, it is expected to make 15.4. So they are the ones that I think are definitely showing a pretty bad scenario, probably the worst case scenario of all of these, charts at least, of a 64% drop. So we could see this film drop anywhere between 60 and 65%. Could potentially we see it do a little bit better, maybe get into the 50s. It's obviously possible. This is still a Disney movie. This is still a film that's going to appeal to a certain degree. People are still going to see it, just not many, but it is going to appeal to female demographic. It's going to appeal to the moms out there with their daughters. I think the word of mouth, though, on this film has absolutely tanked it, and I don't think it's just because of the Rachel Zegler stuff. I think that's a major factor for sure, and clearly based off of the reaction from some of the producers and some of the people behind the scenes, it seems that they are very much aware of how much she has poisoned the well on this movie. The movie itself is also just objectively not very good and is not the story of Snow White in any capacity. You have the elements there for sure. You have the seven dwarves. You have the magic mirror, the evil queen, all those things, but it doesn't actually tell the story of Snow White. And one could argue, of course, that, well, the original Disney film didn't either because it was a variation of the original, Grimm's fairy tale. Sure, but when this is a Disney Snow White movie, people are expecting that classic 1930s story, and when you're not getting that in any degree whatsoever, even if Rachel Zegler was still cast, if the story was different, I think that absolutely would be enough to make this film do a lot better at the box office, because as much poison as she is bringing to this and as much as she is harming this film, I think the deeper harm is actually because of the story itself not matching the original. The fact there isn't even a prince in this movie is also kind of, again, indicative of why people are most likely rejecting this movie and saying, you know what, I might wait until this comes on Disney Plus, or just may not even waste my time on it at all, because ultimately it is just not living up to the standard that people want to see out of a film called Snow White. And so, yeah, when you mess around, you find out, and sure enough, looks like Disney is finding out on this one pretty hard. Now, we do have another film coming out, this case from Amazon MGM Studios, as I mentioned before, the Jason Statham film, A Working Man, which is all about a construction worker who has a past, and if you've seen a Jason Statham action film, you know exactly what to expect. He's going to be whooping a bunch of people, in this case, the Russians, and it is pretty fun. I'm not going to lie, right? This is still a film I'm working through myself, but, it's your typical fare, nothing revolutionary about the movie in any way, and so it's definitely not going to be for everybody, but subjectively, I would say it is absolutely a fun time, and I could see this film doing very well this weekend and maybe even doing better than expected. But right now, Box Office Theory has this projected at $13.4 million domestic. I don't know why my lights continue to do that at 625. I have no setting to have that happen, but I thought that getting new lights would fix that. Apparently it is not. At least these are brighter than the other ones. Anyway, back to it. This is just how we do things. We do things live here. Keeps things real. So Snow White expected to get the first place spot there. And so second place, interestingly enough, and Box Office Pro, I think, is going to be off their rocker on this one, because they have Death of a Unicorn listed at the number 2 spot, and that's the new A24 film. It says here, A24 is back with their ultra quirky lane with a big above the title stars Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega. Jenna Ortega, of course, is a big indie darling in this space, especially A24. High concept, simple enough to be summarized in the title, and crazy enough to catch on the hipster crowds. Oh boy, working on those hipster crowds there. It says there, Working Man, although overall reviews are mixed to negative at a current 59%. Again, interesting that they are mentioning that, and again, it's not all that surprising because critics are not going to like a film like Working Man, but audiences very likely will. They have a Working Man with a similar range, right, 10 to 15 million, so they're basically just using their own subjective choice there to put it in the number 2 spot, so it's going to be, it looks like a battle between those two according to Box Office Pro. I would not go with Box Office Pros. Again, I think that Death of the Unicorn, again, A24 has its audience. It's going to be able to drive people out there, and having a cast like Paul Rudd and especially Jenna Ortega, you're going to see those numbers definitely come in, but I don't think it's going to be able to overpower just how much audiences want to be entertained, and ultimately a film like Working Man is going to be more entertaining. And so that's why you have Box Office Report, which I think is probably the most accurate here, saying 13.6 million expected for Working Man. Again, I do think there will be a competition between this and Snow White. Snow White, I do think, if I had to put money on it, Snow White likely will take the edge because it's still a major Disney film. It's in the vast majority of theaters. It's in the vast majority of the PLFs, right, of the premium format screens. And so it's going to have that edge, even if less people are going to see it just by its nature, whereas Working Man is going to be just in the standard films, but likely might even have more people showing up to it. So that battle will be interesting. But they actually have The Chosen, The Last Supper at the number 3 spot at 8 million. Woman in the Yard from Universal, which I'd never even heard of before, 7.4 million. And The Death of the Unicorn, only 5.6. So again, I don't know exactly what's going on over a Box Office Pro, but clearly they think that A24 crowd is going to show up in a much larger way. Going over to Box Office Theory, we can see a kind of similar thought here. 8.7 million for The Chosen, because again, huge fans of The Chosen are out there for sure. Death of a Unicorn is A24's release. They have it at 6.6 million there, with Woman in the Yard at 6 million, Captain America Brave New World at 2.7. So it's still dropping 30% every single week. And so, yeah, it's going to get to $200 million domestic before it leaves theaters, but it is definitely on the way out. There is just no doubt about that whatsoever. And just to give another comparison here, since we've gone through now all of those films, let's put up Snow White against some of the other releases. And so let's put it up against another Disney princess live action film. That is, of course, Little Mermaid. Obviously, we should have comparisons with Mufasa because it's the more recent live action adaptation that we've seen from Disney. And of course, people are comparing this also to the Marvels as well. What's interesting is that the film is doing better than the Marvels, right? It did not have as good of an opening weekend, right? So the opening weekend was 42.2 for Disney Snow White, whereas the Marvels was 47.6. But then that movie just dropped off a cliff after that point. And so as you can see, right, 50 million to 55 million for the Marvels, but in those daily numbers, it is doing a little bit better. So I do think Disney Snow White will have a higher domestic. I do think it's going to do better than the Marvels total worldwide gross, but look at how different this is versus Little Mermaid. Little Mermaid was at $143 million at this point. So anyone who says, oh yeah, the film is going to leg out, it's going to do great, stop listening to the haters and all the people online. These numbers are just not comparable in any way. So again, at this point, Little Mermaid was at 143. Mufasa was at 64. Remember, that had a slow opening weekend, right? Had a weaker opening weekend, in fact, like 35 million to 42 of Disney Snow White. By this point, though, it was at 64 million. So right now, Mufasa, which had a slower opening weekend, is already got a $14 million advantage now at this point, even though it lost the battle of opening weekends. A big part of that was because Mufasa did leg out. It did have a strong down the line performance. We are not seeing that for Disney Snow White right now, and the projections for the weekend are going to be accurate here. We're not likely going to see that at any point, even if the film, quote, legs out, meaning it does better than expectations, right? We'll have our 2-week projections, which are usually pretty accurate, but if a film does leg out, it can be a chart breaker. The issue with this is that it's doing so poorly in every single market right now, even if it does leg out to the point where it's better than anyone could have expected, better than the historical average, because Disney willed the film to do so by forcing it onto the theaters and forcing them to show the 3Ds and whatever else. Guess what? It's not going to be enough because of the massive budget that this film ultimately has. So let's go over to the charts because we love charts here on OMB Reviews, and we'll go ahead and just first talk about Working Man. We don't have an official budget yet. Some are speculating that it might have cost similar to The Beekeeper. Beekeeper cost about $40 million, and so assuming that, it means the break even would be about $120 million. That's going to be a little bit tough, right? So even though the opening weekend for Working Man is looking good, at least the domestic numbers, this film is not likely to be a big international hit. Just is, again, doesn't seem to have those metrics going for it. But again, hey, we could be surprised here. And then domestically, it's starting off strong, and I think that it's going to have a better than expected opening weekend. But to get to $100+ million domestic, it's going to take quite a bit, right? So never say never. We'll see what the final opening weekend is, and we can make some initial projections on those numbers. But I did want to be more realistic about that we're not likely going to be seeing a box office hit by any means. But if we do see numbers similar to The Beekeeper, again, hey, you never say never. And obviously, if the budget is lower, that could be a huge benefit to it as well. We do have, again, the second weekend for Snow White. And as I said, right, 94.7 is where it currently stands, $94.7 million. We're not likely going to be seeing that improve for the movie anytime soon. Last update from Box Office Mojo. Let's go ahead and let's see. We'll do this live. Again, keeps me honest here. And just as a reminder, I use Box Office Mojo in my charting just because they update more accurately than the numbers.com, or rather more frequently. The numbers.com, sometimes I run into the issue where it's just not loading. The data just does not want to get brought in. And so though I prefer the numbers data, unfortunately with the charting, it just causes more headaches than it's worth. So again, Novocaine is a film that was actually a lot of fun, $22 million there. So still in the red, not likely going to be a huge moneymaker in any way. Again, even if it does lose money though, it's still going to make money back in the long run because of VOD sales, etc. Black Bag, $25 million. Because of a much higher budget, not likely going to make its money back. Mig 17, still a pretty massive flop. Again, we're going to be well over $100 million worth of losses by the end of its run, which is likely coming pretty soon. Last Breath still in the red. The Monkey still adding to its profits. And Brave New World has, again, crossed $400 million. It's not going to get that much further past $400 million. I would say right now there is a cap of about $450 million globally. And again, that's a cap. That doesn't mean that I expect it to get to that amount of money. I would say at this point, with where it's tracking, 415 to 425, likely a final result, which is still pretty bad, right? This is still going to be an average performing film as far as its opening weekend, right, where it compares. And so, hey, at least it's got that going for it. But as far as how much money they spent on the film, it's not looking very good at all. Paddington Peru, right, is definitely doing better down the line. It's not likely going to make its money back in theaters, though, so VOD sales are going to be pretty big on that. And I recommend that one, especially for families out there. If you're looking for a fun, non-offensive film that is able to entertain you and the kids, I definitely would recommend it. Would definitely not recommend Snow White, though. And guess what? Looks like most people would also agree with that sentiment because no one is going to see it. And so those are numbers as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts on this? Again, I will have a fuller box office breakdown this coming Sunday. I'll also put into the chart some of the other films being released, like The Death of a Unicorn, Woman in the Yard. Look into those budgets. The Chosen, of course, that's a special Fathom event, so it's not really worth charting at any point. Obviously, those are good numbers, though, for that type of entertainment, because again, clearly is still a very, very popular property in IP. But whose charting do you think is correct? Do you think that Box Office Report, Box Office Pro, or Box Office Theory again tend to go towards Box Office Theory? I think that Sean Robbins has proven himself to have a pretty good metric here. He's not always correct, but I feel like he is usually more often on the nose with these projections than anyone else. And Box Office Report, I think, is also up there too. Box Office Pro has kind of lost its step since Sean Robbins left Box Office Pro back in the day. But anyway, let me know your thoughts about this. How much do you think Snow White's going to have by the end of this weekend? And projection-wise, what do you think we're going to end up seeing? I think that based off of this, we could probably end up seeing, again, if we see similar drops internationally, we could see it get to upwards of, 125, 130-ish million, maybe a max of $150 million by the end of the weekend. If that is indeed the case, if it's able to get to the upwards of $150 million, let's just go ahead and just, put it out there for the sake of it. Doesn't mean that that's going to happen. I think it's going to be well underneath that number, okay? But if that number happens, right, what we can expect then, a best case scenario at that point would be a $300 million take. So yes, I do think that it likely will still make more than the Marvels, but the fact that even 214 million would be on the case, again, this is a higher end range, 150 million. Again, I don't think it's going to get to that point by the end of this weekend, but even if it does, we're talking about a case where it's barely making more than the Marvels. And even if in the best case scenario, even if it doubles the amount of money after the first 2 weeks, even if it has amazing legs, it's still just getting to about how much they spent on the budget alone, not taking into account marketing, not taking into account that they have to split that number, split those profits, or rather split those the total box office with the theaters, 55% domestically, 40% internationally, 25% in China, where this film is absolutely bombing. So these are just, again, catastrophic numbers here. So we can definitely expect this film to be a $250 million plus loser, probably even $300 million plus loser, depending on those budgets. So what do y'all think those numbers are going to be? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button. Make sure that you smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed Friday of the third week of Lent. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.